the interesting thing to me is how much actually serendipity and the unexpected has played a role in my work. There are certain goals that one works towards and is only a bit closer after a certain number of years than when you started. And then there are other things that just completely fall right out of the sky. I've also seen in thinking about all of this, how a few really important, really great artists and individuals have ended up playing large roles in my life and career as those have evolved. So maybe the thing for us to do is to start not at the beginning, but pretty close to the beginning with a photo, which I think Jennifer is going to put up, of this very adorable looking young boy at the piano. This photo proves one thing, that I have learned at least one thing in my life, which is that I've acquired the proper hand position at the piano, because what's in that photo assuredly ain't it. And I would never dream of putting my hand on a piano that would look like that at this point. I guess this photo was taken when I was about 6 or 7. I grew up in a family of people who were involved in the visual and performing arts. My dad was a percussionist, started playing with jazz bands and dance bands when he was a teenager. My mom owned a family art gallery. There was a piano in my apartment in Washington Heights, where I grew up as a young boy. And I guess I just got intrigued by this black box and the fact that it could make these sounds. I started taking piano lessons right around the time this photo was taken, I would guess. And I took to it pretty seriously. I was lucky because I had a terrific local teacher. For those of you who have kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews that are interested in an instrument, that is so critical, to have a good quality, sympathetic teacher helping to start kids on musical instruments. As I say, I became pretty seriously interested in music. I enrolled in the pre-college division at Juilliard when I was already 12, which is certainly an indication of the kind of focus that I had already had at that age. By the time I was a young and middle teenager, I really was already having the sense that I would be spending my life in music, probably at the piano. I didn't quite know how it would all work out and what was in store for me, but I was pretty already attached to it. I was in pre-college at Juilliard through high school, then I went to college at Juilliard, and I, as is the case with so many aspiring young players, started giving concerts already as a teenager. Well into my 20s, I started playing around the region and then around the country, and I soon decided to plunge into a rite of passage, which was my New York concert debut. And I think we have next up a flyer of my first concert in New York, my official debut, as you'll see, it is at Carnegie Recital Hall. It was presented by a terrific organization, which is still in existence and which I'm still involved with, called Concert Artists Guild, which helps to champion and showcase young artists. I gave my concert. It seemed to have gone pretty well. The New York Times was there. That's one of the most important reasons to do a New York debut. I think they said some good things about me, which was very nice. And I survived that ordeal and continued touring. Started to play in Europe. And like so many touring artists in all fields, I quickly started to encounter all kinds of situations which were far from ideal, but of course we manage them. We have a sample that's coming up, which is probably, as I think about it, one of the earlier existing examples of my live performance work. It's from a television station in Fresno, California. I have only the barest recollection of having done this. It wasn't much of anything. It was a small box of a studio. The piano isn't great. In a situation like that, you often have no editing. You got to just take the leap. You go on, walk onto the high wire without a net. You got to get it right the first time out, and there's no audience. So it feels even more artificial. The piece that you're going to hear is a big, brilliant, dazzling showpiece. It ends with a great flourish, and with great theatricality, I end the piece, and there's no applause. There's nothing, because no one's there. You will see me before the camera goes off, taking a quick second to catch my breath. I look off screen. I think a little forlornly to the producer for at least a hint that, that it went okay. As I say, this is one of the most dazzling showpieces in the repertoire. It is by one of my favorite composers back then and now, the early 20th century French composer Maurice Ravel. And so as we put up the video for that, this is the end of the Toccata by Maurice Ravel. Hello, is anybody there? That's kind of what I felt at the moment. You know, the problem with concert music, and I hate the term classical music, not the music, just the label, is its obsession with the past. If you think about other art forms, and you talk about classical painting or classical art or classical architecture, that denotes a very specific period or style of creation. But in the world of concert music, classical music has come to define the whole thing, and it suggests that everything is old, which is really unfortunate and really unhealthy for any genre of art. I adore old music. I will play with the greatest of pleasure works of Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms and Chopin and so forth. I did have that kind of traditional training, which was heavily focused on older music. But from the time I was already a teenager, I became heavily involved with contemporary music, with living composers. I knew a lot of them. They were my friends. This was unusual in a way that would not have been the case if I were an actor, where I would be regularly working with living authors and doing television work, or if I were a dancer and working with living choreographers. That's unfortunately not the case with so many traditionally trained concert performers. I met early on, around the time of the New York debut, whose flyer you just saw, a really distinguished composer named George Pearl. He was one of the country's most formidable composers. He won the Pulitzer Prize, a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award, a number of Grammys, every award you might imagine. And we worked together extensively. I had a 30-year professional relationship with him. He became a very, very good friend. I worked with him until he died in the early 2000s. I bring him up now, not only because we had collaborated so extensively. I performed a lot of his music, commissioned a few pieces, premiered and recorded a number of his works. But I mention him also to point out this interesting intersection of life and art and inspiration and the kinds of things that inspire art. Because the next sample that I wanted to turn to was a result of a trip that we both made to Seattle. We were both there because I was recording with the Seattle Symphony his masterful first concerto for piano and orchestra. It's a big piece. This was just around the time that I was getting married. And unbeknownst to me at the time, George wanted to write a little piano piece as a wedding gift for my then fiance and myself. But he didn't know how he was going to do it and what it was going to be. He told me later on, only when we were rehearsing together in Seattle, and I played this next little excerpt, did he realize what he was going to do with this piece of music. This is an excerpt from his concerto. It's for solo piano. These notes go by very quickly, but the first little phrase ends on a B, which is the first initial of my last name, of course. And then the second phrase ended on a D, which is the first initial of my then fiance's last name. And he realized at the time when I was playing this what he was going to do to create this piece for the two of us, this wedding piece. He was going to take the B, which first appeared, and then the D, which first appeared, and then he was going to bring them together. And then for the rest of this short piece, the B and the D would always be together. So it's a sweet, lovely thought. But I thought we should hear the inspiration for that piece, the wedding piece. And this is kind of a whimsical, bluesy little interlude for piano from his first piano concerto. And I think we're going to pull up the audio only. And that's it. And that inspired our little wedding piece. As you can see from this sample, I had already by that point started to record. I began actually recording in the 1980s. In the early 90s, kind of around the time this piece was that I recorded George's piece, I recorded one of the lesser known piano concertos by Tchaikovsky. It was very successful. got lots of nice reviews, was distributed all over the world. I recount this story because of the quirkiness of our field. A few years after I recorded this Tchaikovsky concerto, a story started circulating about a lot of recordings that began being released around the world by an obscure pianist, an older woman. Nobody had known of her, and all of a sudden these terrific recordings started appearing. The critics started writing about her, and it was really a lovely human interest story about perseverance and getting acclaim late in life. It was only until a few recordings aficionados, and there are such a thing as recording geeks, started listening a little bit more carefully to this woman's recordings. This is at a time when technology advanced so that there were sort of digital footprints around, that you could do sort of forensic analysis of recordings, that some of these recordings started sounding familiar to these recordings experts. And they revealed that most of this woman's recordings were actually stolen. They were taken from other recordings and released in her name. And one of those was my recording, and this recording of the Tchaikovsky. Maybe we could pull up this little excerpt of an article that appeared in a record magazine. Her CD is up in the upper left, and mine is in the upper right. And you see overlaid the digital underpinning, the digital waves, the digital footprint of her recording and mine, and they are identical. So this woman got a couple of nice reviews, which were basically, should have been for me. And I thought maybe we could just sample the beginning of this, the finale of this Tchaikovsky concerto. It's a brilliant piece. It's a wonderful piece that doesn't get recorded or performed very much. Can we move on to the next slide, which is an audio of the beginning of the finale? And there you are. That was me with the Polish National Radio Orchestra. But unbeknownst to so many people at the time, including me, that was also released in somebody else's name, but it's mine. I was talking before about things sort of dropping unexpectedly out of the sky and snowballing with unpredictable, unexpected consequences. And one of those bits of serendipity actually connected George Pearl, the American composer who I just mentioned, and Tchaikovsky. Because I got a call one day quite out of the blue from American Ballet Theater, where a young choreographer had just made a dance, a new dance set to one of George Pearl's works for piano and chamber orchestra. It was a very difficult, complicated piece. Nobody could play it. ABT realized that I had recorded a lot of George Pearl's music. Could I do it? Now, up until that point, I had no interest in dance. I really felt that it distracted from listening full on to the intricacies and complexities of music. Maybe it was the ADD at work, but I really wanted to focus. If I was watching dance, I was watching dance, and I wasn't hearing some of the great music that it was set to. But I love George Pearl's music, and I viewed this invitation to perform with ABT as a purely commercial venture. I was engaged as guest piano soloist for the season. I was going to be flown in and out of of their tours to do 20 or 25 performances. I had just bought my first house. I needed money. I thought it was a good way to play George's music a lot and make a few bucks at it, and then moved on. Everything went very well, and I thought that was going to be the end of it. But next season, I got a call back again from ABT telling me that they had revived a ballet that the great George Balanchine had created back in the 1940s to the Tchaikovsky concerto that I had recorded. Again, they wanted me to come in as guest piano soloist because it was a very difficult work, and could I do it? And while I was at it, there's another piece by a very gifted young choreographer named Mark Morris, who went on to become one of America's leading dance figures. And he was creating his first piece for ABT, and its lead dancer, who happened to be ABT's artistic director at the time, no less than Mikhail Baryshnikov. And so I ended up being the guest pianist for this first collaboration between Mark Morris and Mikhail Baryshnikov, Misha. All was fine. I left. Misha eventually left ABT. Mark Morris went off to Europe. We all went our separate ways. A few years later, I get another call following on that from something called the White Oak Dance Project, which turned out to be an initiative that Mark Morris and Baryshnikov put together as a modern dance platform. It was a real attempt to merge chamber music and chamber dance. And would I like to join that project and become music director? And this was a great thrill. Again, I had no interest in dance. It ended up occupying pretty close to 10 years of my life with extensive touring all over the world. There's not much record on film of what we did together, but there is one thing which we just dug up from the early years of White Oak Dance Project. It is a dance that Twyla Tharp created as a solo for Baryshnikov. And we will see him, this is a short excerpt from this dance, we will see him sort of fooling around on stage, clowning with the audience, partnering with an imaginary dance partner. It's a wonderfully whimsical and virtuosic number for the dancer. And given that it's Baryshnikov, it is quite extraordinary to see. The music was an arrangement that was taken from music, a suite by the Italian Baroque composer Pergolesi. That's actually the name of the dance. The music that you will hear dimly in the background is for string quartet and harpsichord. I played the harpsichord and led the ensemble. So if we can bring that slide up, we will see a short excerpt of Pergolesi with Baryshnikov. There you go. An extraordinary figure. You know, another essential figure in my life and career as a musician, and probably won't come as a surprise, was Leonard Bernstein, who certainly through his young people's concerts um, was an enormous influence on at least a couple of generations of not only young American performers like me, aspiring performers, but also audiences as well. His music is so much more than just West Side Story or On the Town or On the Waterfront, the film. And I thought we'd sample a couple of brief excerpts of piano pieces. The first one is uh, one of about 40 piano pieces that he wrote over the course of his life. These were ways to experiment and try all kinds of different things um, that um, that he would then incorporate into bigger pieces. So the next video that's up is me performing one of his so-called anniversaries. It's a light, whimsical, brilliant little piece, kind of a study in rhythm. So if we can hear that. 45 seconds of pure joy and delight, delicious little piece. And I thought we'd follow it up right away with another piece of Bernstein's when he was very, very young and an aspiring composer and conductor and pianist. He was in his early 20s, and one of the ways that he made money before he became Leonard Bernstein was to do arrangements of all kinds, taking music written for one group of instruments, one medium, and transferring it to another. And this is a piece by a composer named Ray Scott, who wrote a lot of popular novelty numbers in the 1930s. If the piece is at all familiar to you, it's because some of it was used in Warner Brothers cartoons. It's called Powerhouse. And I guess the notion is if one piano is good, two pianos are twice as good. And so this is an excerpt from this Bernstein arrangement of Powerhouse for two pianos. My partner in music, if not in crime, is the wonderful Emmy Award-winning composer and pianist and good friend of mine, John Musto. If we can hear the next and see the next video. There you go. I was talking before about the artist's life and the vagaries of things on the road. Obviously, there are many pleasant and unexpected surprises of the best kind. I was 1 year doing a series of concerts over a weekend with the Buffalo Philharmonic. They were doing an all Dmitri Shostakovich program, the foremost composer in Russia during the Soviet era. I was playing a Shostakovich piano concerto, and also, as it turns out, on the program was a guest speaker, none other than one of the most famous authors of the 20th century, the great Russian poet and novelist Yevgeny Yevtushenko. And it turned out we had adjoining dressing rooms, and we were able, for that whole weekend and during rehearsals when we weren't on stage, sharing tea together in our adjoining dressing rooms. I think we have a photo of that to show. And we had the most extraordinary, high-minded conversations about art and politics and culture and society and dictatorships and democracies. I thought that it must have been pretty much what it was like having tea with Dostoevsky or Chekhov, or maybe something a little harder with somebody like Eugene O'Neill. That's me and Yevtushenko conversing intensely over a book. I want to go back to television for a moment. I guess sort of came up in the world from my early years when I was on TV in Fresno, California. My publicist's office got an unexpected call one day from CBS Sunday Morning, which said they wanted to do a short, very short segment on Aaron Copland. And could there be arranged a little bit of music, and could we get people into the studio to film it? The biggest challenge was that this call came in on a Friday night and we needed to film on Sunday morning. But into New York, 7 a.m., bright and early on a Sunday morning, we were there. CBS had asked explicitly for 36 seconds of music. No more, no less. And we were able to oblige. We have a couple of photos from just before we went on stage. That is me, of course, a little different than Fresno TV. There's not one, but two makeup artists there. I like to think that it is because CBS does things in the right way, but I also think it may have to do with the fact that they thought that I needed the help of two people rather than one to look decent on camera. The next slide is on the set just before the segment was about to film. There is, of course, Jane Pauley, who hosted the segment. It was, as I say, a segment about Copland. We see his picture at his desk on the left, and there is me at the piano, at the ready, in the shadows, just before the lights and camera came on for our little musical segment. Thinking back to where we started with this program and where I started as a young musician, it occurs to me that I was never interested in being, quote unquote, just a pianist, sort of playing a small repertory of works, touring incessantly. I love to travel. I have no problem with hotel life. But I was always interested in more than that, in producing events, in building projects, and bringing people together. And I guess that brings us to maybe the last big thing that sort of unexpectedly fell into my lap. In the mid-1990s, I first started hearing about some efforts to save Aaron Copland's home, speaking of Copland, in Cortlandt Manor. Copland, of course, is one of the most profoundly influential and beloved musical figures in all of American history. I was involved in all kinds of other things. I didn't really get involved immediately, but they kept at it. I kept on being interested in it. I thought this would be just a casual thing. The Copland's home at that point was not opened. It was overseen by a group of prominent leaders in American music. They asked me to help. This was a volunteer group. I figured I'd go to a few meetings, give a few opinions, and then move on. Well, it's 20 years later. I'm still here at Copland House. There's still much, much to do. This is really the kind of thing, it occurs to me, that I wanted to be doing my whole life. It not only brings together lots of interests that I have, but it enables me to help build something from scratch. And that is what creative artists do: painters, writers, architects, composers, as opposed to recreative artists like me who perform music or plays or dance, film. We are the middlemen between the creator and between you, the viewers, the audience. Copland House is a special place. There is nothing like it. And I thought I would share just the beginning of a short virtual tour that we made about Copland House at very early on in the pandemic. So if we could get to move on to the next slides. I'm Michael Boriskin, and I'm the Artistic and Executive Director at Copland House. And I'm standing at Aaron Copland's mailbox, which must mean that Aaron Copland's longtime home is not far from here. Copland wasn't just one of the 20th century's outstanding composers. He was among the most profoundly influential and beloved musical figures in American history, and really helped to define an important part of the country's cultural identity. For the last 30 years of his life, he lived in an unassuming, comfortable home that really reflected his own modesty and practicality. We're less than an hour north of New York City, and we actually could be way, way out in the country. It is one of the things that Copland so loved about this house. In an 80th birthday interview he gave to the New York Times, he called this house my hideaway, my solitude. And it is indeed a wonderfully serene and still bucolic place to both live and work. You know, Copland, in his memoirs, spoke about living as an artist in a state of continuing self-discovery, which strikes me as one of the defining things of an artistic life and career. It's certainly one of the things that I love about it, because I am still learning things every day. I thought we would end with a few quick musical excerpts, all with the music from Copland House Chamber Ensemble, of works that you almost certainly don't know. I wanted to just, in this last group of musical excerpts, start with the beginning of the slow movement of a piece that is probably unknown to most of you by a composer who is probably unknown to most of you. It is the piano quintet, a quintet for piano and 4 strings that was written in 1907 by Amy Beach. Yes, an American woman who broke lots of glass ceilings back in the turn of the 20th century. She was perhaps the most formidable American woman that the world had known up until that time and for many decades afterwards. Listen, I don't want to say more about it. Listen to the opening of the slow movement that she wrote in 1907. If we can get that up and get that ready, because this is probably what music may sound like when one enters heaven, if you believe in such things. Well, we may have a little time at the end for a Q&A. If anybody has any ideas as to why that piece is not regularly performed and still resides on the margins of mainstream musical life, you get a free subscription to the next season of Copeland House concerts. It's a gorgeous piece, really sublime and passionate and rhapsodic, and is played all too rare. Rarely. It's one of the things that we miss about American music not being more a regular part of mainstream musical life. Fast forward from 1907 to a woman in 1907 writing such luxuriant, rich music to the present, and a brand new piece that was commissioned by Copeland House from an up-and-coming young woman, a very gifted composer named Annika Sokolovsky. And this is music stripped down to its bare essentials. And we talked before about brilliant showpieces and pieces that were so difficult and intricate to play. This is a different kind of difficulty, because you can almost see the notes being played one by one, oh so slowly. But if any note is out of place, you know it, and you will hear it and feel it. And this is, as I say, a different kind of musical and pianistic challenge. Let's hear the video of this very delicate and slow-moving excerpt of Annika Sokolovsky. Every note counts in that one for sure. Our last musical excerpt, I've got to end with Copland. And this goes back probably to a more traditional kind of difficulty, if not a traditional kind of music. This is not the Copland of Fanfare for the Common Man or Appalachian Spring or Rodeo or any of his super popular pieces. Copland wrote a fairly wide repertory of all kinds of really extraordinary chamber and orchestral and vocal music. This is the end of the finale of his sextet for clarinet, piano, and four strings, written in the 1930s. It's a brilliant piece and a quite wonderful piece, and I'd like to think a terrific way to end this program. After the music ends, use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. I think we'll have maybe only a couple of minutes to take your questions. I'll be happy to do that as much as I can. Here now is the music from Copland House performance, live performance of the Copland Sextet, end of the finale. that piece was known for many decades after it was written in the 1930s as one of the most canceled pieces in the repertory because of its extreme difficulties. And now it's regarded as one of Copland's masterworks. Anyway, I was so delighted to have been here with all of you. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Again, just use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. And I will be happy to take questions. If not, I just want to show one more photo. I was talking about music and art being a life of self-discovery, as Copland said, and as far as I'm concerned, as self-improvement. If we can see that last photo, which I think we should still have, you see, you can never get enough practicing in. That's a photo of me backstage, about to go on stage to play with the San Francisco Symphony. There happened to be a piano right backstage, and I figured I'd grab a few last notes of practice before I stepped into the spotlight on stage with the San Francisco Symphony. So always keep at it. This is, the world of the arts is a great and exciting and unknown frontier to be in. And I'm delighted to live in it. I'm delighted to share some of it with all of you here. Thank you all for coming. And I think the one instruction I don't have is how we're supposed to end this. But thank you all so much for joining me tonight. And I hope to see you all again when real life concerts start up again, which I hope will be fairly soon.
We all do, Michael. Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation, entertaining and informative and humorous. Really, it was fantastic. I was just going to ask a couple questions. We have a question in the chat as well, but I just wanted to clarify, did I hear you say you were at Juilliard at 12 years old?
In the pre-college division. I was not a prodigy by any means, and to have started at the piano when I was 6 or 7 is almost a little bit on the late side. We heard that little excerpt of Amy Beach, who is not only an unknown composer, largely unknown composer, but is really one of the great unknown musical prodigies. She started singing songs back to her parents when she was 1, started to noodle around at the piano when she was 2, started to teach herself to read when she was 3, and so forth. So that's a real prodigy. Amy Beach, Mozart, Mendelssohn, they were prodigies. I was in the pre-college division, which was certainly a mark of seriousness. For a teenager, I was really focused on it, and continued in college at Juilliard.
And what was it like working with Mikhail Baryshnikov?
It was, that's for another program. I mean, it was really, really fascinating because I worked with him on and off for, probably about 6 or 7 years altogether between White Oak and the American Ballet Theater. He was really an extraordinary artist. And I just give 2 quick examples of that. First of all, ballet dancers or any kind of dancers, but especially ballet dancers like athletes, their careers are over essentially by the time they're in their 30s, because it's an athletic thing. And Misha recognized that. He did not want to keep on dancing beyond a point where he couldn't do it anymore. That's a rare thing. But at the age of, in his late 30s, he really remade himself from a classical ballet dancer to a modern dancer, which is a huge thing, to just remake yourself as an athlete and as an artist. He studied with Martha Graham and several other pioneering modern choreographers, and that's what White Oak was about, and which he, was involved with and led for probably close to 20 years. And the other thing also, I mean, we literally did hundreds of performances together all over the world, all different circumstances and concert stages. And really the great thing that I saw about him was it didn't matter how he felt before he stepped foot on a stage. He could be feeling awful. He could be sleep deprived. He could be sick. He could be hungover. Once he set foot on stage, no one would know any of that. It was all about the art. The guy really had extraordinary artistic integrity. And those are some of the things that I took away from having worked with him as much as I did.
We have a few comments in the chat. I'm not sure if you're able to read them, Michael. I'll just read them out loud for everyone. Okay, so when will music from Copeland House be able to perform live in-person concerts again?
Thank you. I had hoped somebody would ask that. We actually are making plans to start performing again in the fall with the start of the fall season. It's so extraordinarily satisfying to be talking about the start of a fall season again, after not having had that for over a year now. Our location is still to be finalized, but we will be doing, as we have been for over 10 years, a main stage series of concerts in Westchester. And, please be on the lookout, because we will be doing a series in Westchester for sure, as well as our main stage series in New York at the City University of New York Graduate Center, and of course, concerts on the road and recordings and everything else. We'll still keep up some of our virtual work as well. So look for us.
Someone would like to know if you're still performing, or are you doing all the behind the scenes?
No, I'm right there. Some of those, the new piece by Anna Sokolovsky, we literally just recorded, filmed a couple of weeks ago. The Amy Beach was, we filmed and I performed in a month ago. We've got 2 more films that we're producing next week. I play in lots of those concerts, and lots of concerts as a guest pianist, a guest soloist for presenters all over the country and around the world. So I am still very much at it as a pianist. I often think of myself as sort of constitutionally schizophrenic. There is the there's the producer and impresario, and there's the pianist. That's who I am. It comes. Everything I do comes from my persona, my work as a performer.
That's excellent. We have someone who just wanted to thank you particularly for the Bernstein piece with 2 pianos, and I agree, that was very entertaining. Well,
Great.
We've gone over our time, and I want to say that it was well worth staying around for. But again, we can't thank you enough for coming, Michael. It was such an entertaining program. I did want to mention to all of you Culture Quest fans out there that we'll be having another guest in the fall. September will be featuring Elizabeth Hand, the author, the prolific author that I'm sure you're familiar with. So we look forward to that, and I hope you'll tune back in. Again, thank you so much, Michael, and thank you everybody for coming this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Thank you all for coming.
Good night. Thank you.